Are you ready?
I am ready.
Welcome to the True North Podcast, where two practicing light workers get together every week to continue an ongoing site. You always sip your coffee while I'm doing this.
It's tea today.
It's tea.
And
Well,
is that
your
a problem?
mug. No, it's not. I just realized today, in the middle of it, that I got deja vu of me getting deja vu because of how many times I've been in the middle of the intro, and while I'm talking, you're like, it's always like left hand. It's like I could like replay it, and it's the same thing from every episode. Abby sips
Prepping my throat to say,
her hot
and I'm
drink.
Abby.
Yes, but it's like it's such a consistent thing now. My body's
so
like, we've
strange.
been here before. You've been saying these words and saying that thing so many times that it tripped me up.
Go to YouTube to watch it.
I'm gonna make a compilation of Abby sipping her hot beverage while Ryan talks, and that'll get more views than any of our actual episodes. Two practicing light workers get together to continue an ongoing conversation about wholeness and healing for body and mind so that you can live as your true self and follow your true north. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Abby. Whatever you're doing.
We should high five. Are you next to me on the Zoom?
Yes.
That'll be our thumbnabell. Ready? 1, 2,
Okay.
3, go. Ha! Why can't I reach the edge? Like I moved my
You're too
hand.
far.
Okay. All right.
wow.
All right. This is an audio-only podcast for
Yes,
like
it is.
99% of our listeners.
Exactly. Right? That single person that's still watching.
That one YouTube viewer that's actually
YouTube.
me.
I love it. I love it.
What's going on? What do you I have stuff. Do you have stuff?
Well, I do have a little bit of stuff because Gratitude Month is about to start.
Right. What does that mean for you, Abby, the gratitude warrior?
I am a gratitude warrior. Oh, gosh, it means all kinds of things. But I did want to talk about it today because I think it is a very important component to following your true north. So I do all of this just because I'm a gratitude warrior myself. All of it's free to participate in. It's just something that I believe in so strongly that I want everybody to get on board. So
Get on board. So did you give us the URL and I missed it just now?
no,
The
I
gratitude.
didn't.
Are you
I will.
going to talk about? Okay.
Well,
yeah.
it's basically on my website, so you can go to indigocoaching.net/gratitude, and it kind of gives you a full-on explanation of everything that is, all things gratitude and kind of how you can participate. But so I just wanted to talk a little bit today, though, about what gratitude is, because I've actually themed Gratitude Month this year. I've never done that. I've decided to add a theme.
Was it already Gratitude Month, or have you decided that November is Gratitude Month?
You know, people, 30 Days of Gratitude has been out there for a while.
Yep.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and give you the whole entire backstory as to how this
Thank you.
whole gratitude thing started.
Thank you for not making me have to try harder than I have been trying to pull this out to for this.
I'm just going to
podcast.
give it to you. Let me
Do
just
it.
talk about
Yeah.
it. Okay. No, so prior to being a life coach, as you know especially, I worked for the YMCA.
Yes. Did you really? I did too.
I did, yeah. And I did that for a while and I loved it. And then I got to a point where I felt like, sorry to my old YMCA friends, but they weren't taking care of their people. And it was time for me to kind of put myself first. And I'd come to a place of being very unhealthy. So I left the Y. I went to work for our machine shop. My wife and I own a machine shop and went to work full time there for a while to kind of clean up our systems, OSHA paperwork, all things boring to me. But I'm very good at because it's very systematic and I love putting all that in place.
All the cookie dough and chocolate chips.
Yeah, but then that was supposed to just be like a stepping stone into what am I going to do when I grow up? So anyway, during that time, let's see, how do I tell this story without stepping on people's toes? Okay, so my wife has a couple of siblings that do not approve of us being gay. I'm gay. And we happen to live in a neighborhood with one of her siblings, and that was a big point of contention. But
Jeez, that's got to be rough.
yes, her parents also lived in the same neighborhood. This was pre Patrick, my son. And we loved the neighborhood because it was very much a community feel, which is what I really miss about living in Nebraska is when I moved to Texas, I never knew who I lived by. I didn't know my neighbors, who was on my street, and I wanted that. And so this particular community had that, and I wanted to be a part of that. And so we lived there, but it came to a point where things were so heated in the family that I'm going to try to say this as peacefully as I can, that it was almost impossible for me to go outside of my house because there was so much tension. And if I were to talk to somebody in the neighborhood and that person happened to know the sibling and their spouse, I would be in trouble for that. Like we would get in trouble, So it was horrible. And I wasn't working at the machine shop as much because I was trying to figure out, what I was going to do. And life coaching started to be on my radar, and I was looking into training and all this. And I just got to this point where I had nothing. I had nothing, no hope, nothing good to look forward to. It was just a really rough time for our family. And I had just come back from an art workshop in Squam, which is where I met Marie and Cherry. And just was real inspired to, get creative, tap into that side to at least find some relief and find some happiness. And while I was there, they had this tree outside of the dining hall because it was this really cool old camp on the East Coast, like summer camp. It was gorgeous. This isn't a place
called Squam?
It's on Squam Lake. Yes, and it's Squam Art Workshop and they still have it. The Squam Art Workshop is where I went. It's like, I can't remember the name of the camp, but it's out in New Hampshire.
Oh, wow. I had no idea that the gratitude tree thing was born in the same place that you met Marie.
Yeah, well, yeah. So after coming back from that trip, like there they had this tree outside of the dining hall because it's all very arts and craftsy kind of workshop. And someone had filled the tree with ribbons because all the leaves were gone. So they put all these beautiful ribbons, colored ribbons in the tree. And so when I got home, I was that visual, it was so beautiful to walk down this path and turn the corner and see this tree that was totally barren of leaves, but still full of color. And it was just beautiful and hope and just peace. It's like, I just wanted to stand there and watch them as they're all flickering in the wind. So I come home back to my life and I'm like, oh my gosh, something has got to give. We're about to go into the holidays and I need to get this heaviness off of me. So I started thinking about things that I could do for myself, and that tree came to mind. And I thought, wouldn't it be amazing, because it was a fairly new neighborhood. So I had a small, young oak tree right out in front of my house, and my office window looked right out on that tree. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could hang pieces of paper off of that tree of things that are going good in my life, things that I am grateful for in my life, things that do bring me hope and excitement. And then when I'm sitting in my office and I'm working on things, I can look out the window and see all those things blowing in the tree and remember that I still have hope, that there's still something good in this world. So I literally got a piece of cardboard, wrote on it gratitude tree. I cut out some pieces of paper that were waterproof paper. This was real homemade. And
I didn't actually know waterproof paper was a thing.
Yeah, believe it or not, it is. Because I'm like, well, it can get windy, it can get rainy here in November. So yeah, and I didn't want to lose them, but I needed to be able to write on them and didn't want to spend a lot of money doing it. So I did that, and all of a sudden I had some neighbors that were like, what is this? Because it's on the sidewalk where everybody walked. They're walking their dogs. And so I would explain it, and they're like, well, can we do it too? And I'm like,
yes.
Well, sure. So I put out this toolbox and just threw in some Sharpies and extra pieces of paper, and then I added on a cardboard sign, please participate. So I ended up getting all these pieces of paper for myself and for my neighbors hanging off of this tree, which I'm sure didn't go over well with the siblings, but at that point it didn't matter. It became a thing, this sign of hope for me that there is good in the world that's outside of this story that feels so heavy to me right now. And so I did it for the entire month, and I literally just felt this huge physiological change, mental change, just by every day. And it was hard. Some days were really hard. And it would literally come down to, I am so grateful that I have to go buy groceries, because it does force me to kind of get out of the house and interact with other people. And, just very simple things is what it came down to. But that's what saved me and sort of pulled me out of this really heavy time in my life. And so then the next year rolled around, and I wasn't going to do it, because at that time kind of things were on their way up. And all of my neighbors are like, where's the gratitude tree?
Where's the thing? This is the thing now. Yeah. You have to do the
right.
thing.
Like, we really liked it. Are you going to do it again? I'm like, oh wow, this is a thing. Yeah. So that is how the gratitude tree started, and that's all it was. Like, for me, gratitude month was literally just every November, because I did the art workshop, I think it was like in September or October. And then I came home, and then I was like, Thanksgiving's one of my favorite holidays, so let's do it in November, because that's when everybody's giving thanks. And then it became this thing every November where I put this tree out. Whatever neighborhood I lived in, I took some tree in my front yard, and I upgraded to like shipping labels, which are a lot sturdier than waterproof paper, and
Right.
a fancier yard sign and all that. And then once I became a life coach and I really started digging into the research about the effects of gratitude, did the connections start being made for me? Like, this is more than just saying thanks.
Yeah.
It definitely changes and rewires your brain just by having a regular practice of gratitude. And so the gratitude tree kind of turned into this whole month-long project of, okay, where else can we celebrate gratitude? Not everybody can host a tree or wants to host a tree, so what are some other things you can do? And it's just grown every year. And so I call myself a gratitude warrior, because it's not a natural state of being for us. We're kind of hardwired for that negative. I said that. Did you hear that? It was very German. Hardwired.
Very hardwired.
We are very hardwired.
Yours was
we're
better than mine.
hardwired.
Mine was not German. Mine was just noise.
Something for that negative bias. And so, it actually takes practice. And so I feel like I'm constantly battling my ego, and I'm battling my mind, and to override all that negative bias, to kind of stay in a state of gratitude. And so that's why I'm a gratitude warrior. It's like I'm constantly battling that negative bias, because this is a better place for me to be. It's a higher frequency. It's more in line with being in my true north, being my rich, abundant, and wild self. So there you go.
So what does it look like this year with like the Rona and stuff?
Well, right. So I was kind of on the fence, like, well, maybe I don't put up my tree this year. That's going to require people to touch things and blah, blah, blah. But then, in a way, the heaviness that I feel this year is a lot of that same mental heaviness that I felt when I started the gratitude tree. And I thought the whole point in me doing that was for me. And it was self-love for myself. And so I'm going to still put up my tree, and I have many people who participate who just do trees inside of their house. And then ultimately it's everybody else's business whether or not they want to participate, right? So my neighbors can come by. They can, one thing I did in April, I did an impromptu 30 days of gratitude in April. I called it the whisper tree. Oh my word, that was the biggest sneeze ever.
That
Bless
was the opposite of a whisper.
Gesundheit.
I was going to try to keep it in. I was like, no, this is
don't
going
do
to
that.
explode out of me whether or not I wanted to, so we may as well. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Whisper tree.
So,
April.
in April. And I thought, well, if, I'm still going to put up my tree in November. And if people just want to whisper their gratitudes to the tree versus like having to touch a pen and a tag and write it down, then the energy, because then you're still putting an energetic imprint on my tree. You can just come by my yard, because I get a lot of walkers, and my neighbors, I now know everybody on my street, they love it. And so I thought you can either whisper your gratitudes or you can actually write it down, and I'll have sanitizer and all that. But so the tree is still happening because I think it's highly important. But I did decide to theme this year based on a topic that we've really been talking about together, but then also with our tribe, where if you think about it, practicing gratitude is all about self-love.
Yes.
And in order to truly love yourself and have that appreciation for yourself, that's when you're open to receiving. I know we have an entire episode that probably won't come out for a while on this very topic. Wasn't that our backup episode?
It was our backup.
Yeah, so I can't say anything about it.
I mean, you can. It's just gonna get repeated. It's not like we never repeat ourselves.
Right? Yeah. And then, so if you're practicing that self-love by participating in gratitude and finding all the good that's coming into your life, it also opens you up to receiving, which then if you're able to receive, you are connecting. So there's sort of like this dual theme, and everybody is struggling to connect this month, this year with the Rona. Yeah. So I've got a couple of ways I'm going to be changing it up this year, and I just thought, well, that's kind of a fun theme, self-love and connection. Because in a way they go hand in hand.
Yeah, it's so interesting. The negativity bias you're talking about. Like, I had 2 interactions in the last couple of weeks, both of which were people talking about very similar, very difficult times in their life. And for one of them, I didn't share this on the podcast. I shared this on the tribe call. I was going to try to like gauge how bad the situation was that they were talking to me about, kind of like the body compass meter. And so I was like, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? And they instantly had an answer. And I said, okay, what's the best thing that's ever happened to you? And there's a long pause, and they're like, I'm not really sure. And instantly I was like, okay, we don't even have to go into the rating how bad the thing is that we're talking about. Let's go into the fact that you don't even know what the best thing is that's happened to you. You don't even have something to put in that bucket. Let's dig. Let's find that, And then I took a page from John Amaril's playbook and was like, let's focus on all the things that are great in your life and see what happens to you. And then the second one was I did 2 arc healing sessions yesterday, and one of which was with a person who also went through something really, really, really difficult a little over a year ago. And I asked, what would the you of today tell the you of that day if you could go back and talk to that person? And they said, well, I wish I could tell that person that life gets better, but I don't know that it really has. So I said, well, are all the things that made you hate life then still happening now? And then they went into a list of like, well, no, that was going on, and that's not happening anymore. And that was going on, and that's not happening anymore. And this thing made it really worse, and that's kind of gone away. And so just started listing off all the ways that life is better. And I'm like, okay, so let me repeat back to you what you just said. Even when we have the facts that could cultivate gratitude naturally, we just have a way of ignoring those. Or they get trampled by the other facts that also exist and are equally true that could give us a reason to just really be unhappy with what our life is. We have both. We have all the material to be miserable about life or super thrilled about life. And we just gravitate very easily to the ones that give us something to complain about. Like you don't have to work to have a complaining practice.
Yeah, exactly.
But gratitude is one of those things that very rarely happens on accident. You have to do it. Just like you have to do yoga to have a yoga practice. You have to do meditate. You have to actually do it. And then what I'm hearing from you is that when you do that, you're rewiring your brain away from that negativity bias. So that when you have all the reasons to be happy about life, they don't replace the reasons to be upset, but they at least balance it out and are in the equation with at least as much weight as the things that we would normally point to about why we're upset about life. It's a balancing act. You're bringing it back into balance. You're just training yourself to pay attention to the good stuff too.
Exactly. And when you can practice that very much like exercise, then you can kind of create this muscle memory, because you are strengthening those neurons that you're firing in your brain to make it more of just kind of a natural state of being. And the cool thing is like they've studied gratitude so much where they'll hook somebody up to like an MRI and then get them into a state of gratitude. And the crazy thing is it lights up the regions in the brain that are associated with the neural networks that light up when we connect with others, but also when we experience pleasure. So you are activating the pleasure neurons in your brain every time you practice gratitude.
That is fascinating.
And this is where they think it started. They think it actually evolved in like early humans out of that need for grooming others for parasites.
What?
Sounds so weird, right? Yeah, but like in the early humans, like you had to, like they didn't have showers. You think of like
Right.
Neanderthals and whatnot. Unless you're a very biblical person, you may not think that there's actually cavemen. But
You're probably not listening to this podcast.
yeah, exactly. That's true. But they would groom each other for parasites. And so there was a feeling of gratitude, you know, to that other person because you can't necessarily get up all in your
Right.
hair and do that yourself. And so they think that gratitude
That's why
actually...
it's connected to the connection parts of your
Yes,
brain, because it's
right.
something that was originally founded in an actual connection that was
Yeah.
helpful. That's fascinating.
I know. So,
So if you really want a strong gratitude practice, go pick some parasites out of someone else's hair.
Exactly. No, but it's just, you know, we think people kind of pass it off and they dismiss gratitude. Like, oh, it's just saying I'm thankful for this, I'm thankful for that. And it's not. Like it is an actual physical expression, you know.
It's biohacking.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, you know, you're tapping into that place in your brain that can help give you emotional regulation, pleasure, pain management. It's all in that same neural network in your brain. So
I wonder what would happen if we started each episode with a gratitude instead of ending each one.
well, yeah, because automatically we're putting ourselves in a higher frequency just by doing it. Words have power, as we've said many times.
Right. Maybe we should do that for at least like November to see what
Yeah,
happens.
that's fun. I
Start
like
the
that.
episode with what are you grateful for?
Yeah, perfect. I like that.
Okay, we'll start that next time because our next one is the first official November one.
Exactly.
Right? Is that,
yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. So that's kind of about gratitude. So I think it's so important because it did help change my life. It's not just one of those, you know, hot topics this time of year that I've sort of riding on the coattails. Like it truly worked for me
Worked out that
prior.
way.
It was one of my very first tools that changed my life.
And it came from you, and you didn't look at this and think, oh, this is a tool I'm going to make. This is going to help people. I can use this. This is going to work into my coaching. It was just something you did to love yourself.
Yeah, this
And-
was prior to me coaching anyone.
I can't help but to notice that you went from being in a situation where you yourself, for just what you were as a human, was a problem for the people in your neighborhood. Like you weren't doing anything. You were just being what you are. And people found a
Yes.
way to have a problem with that, and that affected you. And then the gratitude tree is also you just being what you are, and the physical manifestation of that being something that people in your neighborhood love and are drawn to and are participating in and welcoming of. You turned that entire dynamic on its head, but you didn't change anything about yourself. You just continued to be you. But you found yourself in a place where, in a different setting, where being you had the inverse effect.
I made a choice.
Yeah.
Yep. And I made
That's
a
so
choice
cool.
to, yeah. Yeah. So I made a choice to kind of live in a higher frequency, and I didn't know that's what it was at the time, like you said, but it worked. So
We never really
Yeah.
know at the time. Like this for when you're feeling defensive thing. We are recording this 1 hour early than normal, and I almost completely forgot. And right before we were doing this, I was actually prepping a Google Doc where I was fleshing it out because it's actually evolved since then. Like I've actually added. Okay, so if people don't know what we're talking about,
Yes, I
a
was
few
gonna say
episodes
back
ago,
up.
I made a note on my phone called "For When You're Feeling Defensive" for me to read for when I'm feeling defensive, and I'm really good at recognizing it, and so I can pause, I can read the thing, and it has a table of contents, and like here's you can drill down to the specific situation that you're in, and then there's a little coaching thing from me to me who knows me very well and knows what I'm doing in my brain and says basically just stop it. And so you put that on your blog on Indigo Coaching, which was super creepy because I didn't send you. Well, here's what made it creepy. I didn't send it to you as a static file. I shared my document
Note.
on my phone with you, so that.
Yes.
But that makes it so you can access it. But every time I make a change, it changes on yours.
It does.
And so you told me that you posted it the morning you told me you posted it. I had made a change to it on my phone.
Oh,
I had updated it because I updated it again this morning.
Yep. Okay.
And then, but I knew that you had already, that was after I shared it with you. So I write it, I share it with you, I change it on my phone.
Because I asked you for it because I wanted to share it because it's amazing.
And then you say, I posted it. And then I go and I read it, and the one that you posted included the change I made.
Oh, that's awesome!
And I was like, how did she get it? How is this on her blog? I changed it after sharing. I was flipping out. I was like, is this thing somehow connected to my phone? And then I realized what was going on. It's a living document. And so I'm like, well, let's put it in a place where it can be alive. And so I'm making a Google Doc with the most updated version. And I'm actually going to share that publicly. Like, I'm going to put it on our Instagram. I'm going to put it on our website.
I'll add it to the post.
I'm going to share it out on my Facebook and be like, hey, this is a tool. You can copy it, download it, change it to match you, or just kind of keep tabs on it as I update it. But it's starting to be a thing where, like, I made, like, kind of like your gratitude tree, I made it for myself. And I shared it on our tribe, and that got some good feedback, and people were like, oh, wow, this is something that I'm going to start using. And so it's kind of taking a life of its own and starting to turn into its own thing, and it's super personal. Like, I really feel a lot of apprehension around putting this out in the public, because while it is something that's useful for people, it's also giving them a very deep window into me.
Sure, absolutely.
And, but again, like, it's more important that people can...
But here's what I really love about it. And this is exactly why I wanted to share it, because, when you are feeling defensive, you are putting yourself into that state of fight or flight. You are, in all actuality, defenses are up, right? You are ready to fight.
Chemically in your body, yeah.
Correct. And so when that happens, it's like all blood flow to the brain just kind of gets shut down, right? And so there's no way to really think and respond. And so what I love about the document is all you have to remember is go to the document,
and then read it, and it's there.
And then read it, and that thought process, then that whole, like, are you defensive? Yes or no? No, great, move on. Yes.
Why are you defensive?
Why?
Well, what's
then
going on? Yeah.
Yes, and I love it because it just helps somebody so much, walk them out of that state, and all they have to do is open the damn thing. Like, it's genius. I like it a lot, and it's exactly why I wanted to share it. We've talked about this topic so many times at length. I mean, how many episodes back are we talking about, is it really about you? Is it really about you? And that's what this document does. And it's kind of, I'm glad you brought this up and we're talking about it, because, it helps you detach from an outcome, because you can really take a hard look at yourself. And it's basically asking you, like, are you triggered? What would it be that's triggering you? It's like you can really figure out if it's you or the other person, and remembering to stay in your business. So.
Right. And, like, I just had a brain fart. I don't... Stay in your business. Oh, so the other thing that I really hope comes out of this is, in my own, like, I'll give an example. I'll give a real world example. There was a day this past weekend that I had the expectation that I was going to sleep in. I shouldn't have had that expectation knowing that I also have a toddler, but I did. So when I inevitably woke up earlier than I wanted to, I started the day in a bad mood. Did I bubble? Did I put up shields? Did I do my little gratitude before I get out of bed thing that I learned from Tony? No. And so I was already just in a bad spot from the get-go, and it didn't ever really get better. I just kind of, like, managed myself through the day and tried to make sure I was functional and didn't bite too many heads off, right? So at the end of the day, I go to my wife, and I'm like, hey, feedback time. I feel like I need it, and you may have some, right? And she did, and she gave it. And in that moment, I immediately, like, I kind of had my guard down on purpose, because I'm the one asking for the scrutiny.
Sure, yeah.
But it still kind of bubbled up as I listened. And I realized that the defensiveness, I feel like I am under attack, and so I'm going to put up armor to keep myself from feeling the pain, right? But that very armor also keeps me from connecting with my wife.
Yep.
And so I had to stop and say, like, I had to say, okay, I don't want to be on my phone while you're talking at me, so I'm going to pause, I'm going to read this thing, and then I'm going to come back to you. And I did, and then we continued the conversation. I had to do that like 3 times. But I also felt the armor melting off. Because the one thing that I noticed was that when I feel the urge to just blurt out something that is just to the contrary of whatever I just heard, I heard something I don't like, and my reflex is to turn it back on them, or to make it their fault, or to talk about how that's not reality, that's your perception, or whatever, right? My impulse to do that is there to protect me from what I think is a threat, and the thing that I think is a threat is actually an invitation to connect. Those are one and the same. And the reason I see it as a threat is because it requires vulnerability. And when you open yourself up to getting hurt, there's a possibility that you will get hurt. But you can't connect without opening yourself up. And so when I realized that protecting myself from potential pain is the same thing as protecting myself from connecting with another person, it becomes... It's more valuable to me that we connect. So it's worth it to me to put down my armor, even if it means I feel pain. Because ultimately the pain that I was afraid of feeling was a growing pain. It was, what if she's right?
Yeah.
And what if I take that lead and I have to change something about myself? Like, that's not comfortable. That's not fun. It doesn't feel good to admit to myself that I don't have everything figured out, and I don't like any of that. And so I can either protect myself from it and thus protect myself from connecting with my spouse, or I can turn that wall into a bridge by knocking it down. And then, go forward with the risky business of crossing it. And I just feel like owning your defensiveness is the first step in doing that.
Yes. You just reminded me of my favorite quote right now, which is...
Favorite quote right now?
Right now is, everything you want is outside of your comfort zone.
Oh, that's like... Where did you hear that? Because there's another quote that says life begins at the end of your comfort zone.
It's... that's another good one. I don't know. I wrote it down a while ago, and I, of course, didn't write down the source, but it has recently circled back into my life. And if you think about, things that Tony said, things that John said, things that Marie said, that we said, you have to be uncomfortable to really get into that frequency of what you want. Sometimes things are uncomfortable. And like you said, having difficult conversations like this that turn out to be incredibly meaningful or turn into growth opportunities do require trust, vulnerability, and empathy. And all of those things are hard. All of those things are uncomfortable. But what you're saying is like practicing all three of those, being able to keep yourself in check if you find yourself getting defensive about it so that you can connect, is ultimately getting you what you want, which is a beautiful connection with your wife. So, or anything else that you want, if it's, a different experience that we're talking about. So, but yeah, I mean, same thing. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. We have to do hard things to actually get what we want. We always talk about, sometimes that might mean you have to lose a relationship to be in your true north. Sometimes that might mean, you've got to quit your job. Maybe that needs, like the girl that John talked about, his client, where she came and had a session with him and went home and changed everything about her life.
Moved to a different country.
You can't tell me that's not uncomfortable and difficult. Right. Yeah, she moved to Italy to join some culinary institute. So, but it's so true. And if you can just sort of lean into that discomfort, imagine what's going to come out of it.
Yeah. Ugh. And that's just the first step. Like, I used to work for a guy who would do a lot of public speaking, and at one of the talks he gave, he goes, everyone says people want to feel listened to. But no, people want to actually be listened to. Like, it's like, I don't really care about making you feel listened to, because if I'm working on making you feel listened to, then I'm not focusing on actually listening to you. Listen to them, right? And in the same way, like, it's one thing to like in this instance, it's one thing to make my spouse feel like I am listening when she gives me feedback, right? And I can sit there and be like, oh yeah, I can adopt a posture, and I can adopt a tone, I can make a face, and I can be like, oh yeah, I'm really thinking about everything I said and working it into my little, but then it's another thing to actually fucking do it. Like, I can have that conversation. I can be vulnerable. I can be open. I can take the feedback. I can, deal with the emotions and not be defensive and let my guard down. And then we get through it. Great. I've been vulnerable. I've been uncomfortable. That's the first step of the race. Mm-hmm. And then I have to do it. And that's when I find myself using the document more often than not during a conversation where I'm receiving input from somebody. But when I'm actually on my own in a situation where I'm faced with a choice to either grow up or give up, and I'm feeling defensive on my own at the prospect of what it would take for me to be my best in this moment, when I would rather just be lazy. I would always rather just be lazy. That's just how I am. I would rather not do the work. I would rather spend time inventing a trash can that empties itself than fucking empty the trash can. And so that's how I am in relationships too. And so I find myself like there's two versions of me, and one is like, do the thing that would make you the best version of yourself right now, and the other version that's like, just do what's comfortable, man.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's easier to just do what you
know. And then when those two versions of me are talking to each other, I get defensive. Yeah. Then I have to use the document on myself. And so, yes,
this is an interesting way to put this into perspective, because if you really think about it, like the way that we show up now was pretty much learned by our brains between the ages of 0 and 25 years old.
Yeah.
If you think about that, I do not want to be making decisions based on a 10-year-old self, based on a 5-year-old self, based on a 15-year-old self. Like,
but
that
we do.
Shit doesn't serve me, but we do, because that's when our brain developed. So unless you have a growth mindset and you are constantly working on this stuff, like, you are going to show up because as that person, because that's when you learned to do those things. And I'm like, no, thank you.
Oh my God. So people just really need to take a second to do this thought experiment and build this idea that every single version of you that you've ever been is literally in there right now still. Mm-hmm. Just because you grew into a different person that looks slightly different and has a different set of experiences, that doesn't mean that other person's not still there. You're like a snowball. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and
exactly.
The thing that makes the snowball big is the fact that every smaller version of the snowball is in the snowball.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Or the Russian dolls, like, where they just go.
Right.
Yep.
And so then one of the skills that I have learned in the last year that has helped me so much is to ask myself, what childhood experience am I recreating now? What thing that I went through as a kid did I find my way to recreate in the present? Because we do that. I've had so many psychologists say that you get into a relationship, you find your way into relationships, you attract relationships that recreate family of origin dynamics that you have yet to fully process. Mm-hmm. And that's why they say, like, you always marry your mom or you marry your dad. Well, it's because there's stuff that happened, and until you process it, you're going to recreate it for yourself.
Yes, it's like your chewing example.
Yes. What chewing example?
When I was in Colorado and I was recording from the car, and we were talking about how, like, your parents used to tell you that you chewed too loud.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, like, you carried that over
and then you find your way to somebody else who's like, you're a loud chewer. And then you're triggered. Well, that's on purpose.
And then you're teaching your kid not to be a loud chewer.
Yes, and
because you've learned.
You subconsciously on a soul level
Yeah.
did that on purpose, brought somebody into your life that continued to replay that thing because you still need to work it out.
Yes.
My kid will hurt himself and then during the day, and then that night will tell me about the time he hurt himself, but he says it in present tense because he is going back and reliving it to process the experience because he didn't have the opportunity to process it all right there in the moment. Mm-hmm. And we do that. And so when you're in a situation, if you ask yourself, what childhood version of me was going through this thing, and that now the present version of me felt the need to recreate those circumstances so that I can work it out. Because then the answer there is like, that version of you is the you that you're going to show up as right now if you don't circumvent that.
Yep.
Rayron has a certain set of things, right? Social things, personal things, self-love things, self-image things, motivation things, and I still find myself in situations where I recreate Ray-Ron's experiences. Because I haven't fully processed what it meant to be Ray-Ron. I haven't really done all of the work that the Ray-Ron chapter of my life gave me to do. And so when I'm in those situations, when I'm recreating the Ray-Ron situations and I'm triggered and I'm defensive, if I'm not intentional, I go back to being Ray-Ron. I am 100% a 17-year-old in a 35-year-old's body.
Yes.
And just recognizing that is huge. Because then you get in a conversation as an adult with another adult, and you can learn to tell when you're not being an adult anymore. You're being a 25-year-old self. You're being a 17-year-old self. You're being your 5-year-old self. I had to have someone tell me to my face, you're not resisting your wife. You're resisting your dad. And not a version of your dad that he was right before he died. Not a version of your dad that he was when you were in 20. The version of your dad that he was when you were 5. And everything that you've said in the past hour is something a 5-year-old would say to an abusive father, not to what's going on.
Interesting.
And so, not everybody has the ability to sit in front of a therapist for 2.5 hours and have him mirror that back to him. But I promise you that's what's happening. I promise you that on some level, when you're triggered, when you're defensive, when you're feeling pain, when you're feeling like you need to protect yourself or attack somebody else, or just like reflect everything back on other people so it doesn't get through your armor, you are not being the version of yourself that is the age that your body is. You've retreated into a younger version of yourself that had to go through the thing that you're now recreating for yourself because you still have stuff to process. So fucking process it.
Yeah.
Take care of that kid. And that's the whole reparenting thing, right?
Yep.
And own the fact that you're being a 17-year-old, and that's just how our bodies work. It's not that you're broken. There's something wrong with you. It's not like you have a whole lot of work to do. Like, we're all doing that work. That's what it means to be human. We're all doing that. I'm probably reverting to a younger version of myself right now that used to soapbox about this stuff all the time. You know?
But I think that's a crucial point to make, is we are not broken. Because this is how we operate does not mean there is anything that is wrong with us. It's just a fact. This is how our brains wired. This is how we are as humans. And it is a human experience to then turn that into growth, to life lessons. Because that's what our soul's here to do in the first place. Like, we are here to learn. We are here to grow. And so if you don't do that, then yeah, you are just going to be recreating these experiences that are not in line with your true north.
And then
but it doesn't mean you're broken.
Well, then you have an adult who they just always act like a child, and it's easy to be like, why didn't they grow up? Like, you know, they should. You have this like certain maturity benchmark that people should reach at certain ages, and then you can look at them with compassion and be like, oh, you must be acting like a 5-year-old because you're still processing the things that 5-year-old you went through.
But here's the other thing I want to kind of put on everybody's radars is when souls reincarnate, they're all different ages. And so there may be a young soul that comes in who acts like a 5-year-old their entire life because they're so new to learning these soul lessons that it's going to take them their entire life. And that's where the hysterectomy idea really comes into play. It's like, I hope that this person will learn in their lifetime this lesson so they stop acting like a 5-year-old, but they might not. They might not. They may have to keep recreating that experience for this entire lifetime and then repeat it in the next lifetime because they didn't get it in this one, because they're young and they're new to this learning. And so that's where I think, you know, empathy and just meeting people where they are also comes into play. Like, I don't necessarily have to be best friends with you, but I also want to meet you where you are. And part of that means I have to recognize that maybe that's where you are in your soul journey. Perhaps you're just really new and young to this, and you're in the middle of learning a lesson. And that's just what I need to be okay with, because I can't change them. I can't change that. But
right. And there's no, you're not allowed to judge yourself for not fitting into the societal mold. Like I just heard a story last night about someone who learned a very significant life lesson 35 years into their marriage, and it changed everything for them.
Sometimes it takes that
their
long.
whole life. And our culture is like, you know, that's not the time to do that. That's a lesson you should have learned when you were younger, or, you know, look at all the time wasted or whatever. Like, there's all these ways that you could judge yourself for just quote unquote waiting that long to learn that lesson. But one of the things that I'm like I don't know if I'm quoting somebody. I'm sure other people have said this in some way, shape, or form. But the kind of mantra that's on the front of my mind right now is it all happened the way it was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
It all happened the way it was supposed to happen. Like I got, and that came from the job that I'm trying to get. And they sent me these interview questions. I don't know if I said it on the podcast. I've said it so many times by now. But they sent me these interview questions, and I was very unapologetically my quirky self. Mm-hmm. Very not professional. Very not all buttoned up in what people want to hear in the corporate world. And I got a very mixed bag of reactions from the people who were in charge of whether or not I get this particular spot. And then, there was some recovery work, and I sent over some more corporate America acceptable answers. And I was like, okay, well, here's my take two, and I thought, man, like, it kind of sucks to like botch your first impression and have to make a second one immediately, and what is, do I even want this job now that it's just going to be a bunch of recovery work for people who just don't jive with how I was the first time and all. And I'm sort of telling myself all this story, and then, but the second round of answers they really liked, but they'd already given the job position to somebody else in the meantime. And so my thought was like, if I had just played ball and behaved myself the first time, we'd already be talking about, right? Well, then here's the cool part. Then they say, we're actually looking to create a new position just for you because we like you so much. And then the story became, what if both of these emails, what if the first volley and the second volley was all a first impression? And what they learned was that I'm able to recover when I make a mistake. Exactly. And to the point where now, even though the position I was applying for got filled, they're just going to make another one out of thin air, which is also what happened in my last job. I interviewed a guy who wasn't hiring, and we talked and got moonshine together, and then boom, they were like, we made this position for you. So hindsight is really 2020, and the takeaway from that whole thing is it all happened the way it was supposed to. Mm-hmm. I haven't even started the job yet, and there's already a story there. It's all riddled with something that looks like a mistake, something that looks like a should have done this differently, should have done that, shouldn't have done this. It stirred up all kinds of feelings towards me in people who don't know me, and that's going to influence a lot of our future together if this ends up happening, right? And there's so many opportunities for me to beat myself up over how this whole thing went down, but there's also a whole lot of opportunity, like we were saying at the beginning of this podcast, to look at the whole thing and say this all happened the way it was supposed to happen. If you are in the back chunk of your life, looking at all your life decisions, and then finally learning a life lesson and realizing that maybe you need to change course, that's fine. It all happened the way it was supposed to happen.
And you are exactly where you are supposed to be.
Oh my God! Say that again.
You are exactly where you are supposed to be.
Yes! Yes! Do you like my green cardigan? There is
nothing to fix. There is nothing broken. You may have growth to do, but it will happen. Do. Yes, we all, that is the human experience, but you are still exactly where you are supposed to be. I mean, that may mean like I have someone very close to me, probably similar to a story you were just talking about, someone very close to me where, after 26 years of marriage and 2 very grown children, decided they were gay and left the marriage. Like, is that a lesson they should have learned, prior to getting married to the wrong gender? But no, everything happened the way it should. And this person is exactly where they are supposed to be. There are reasons why we don't learn things for 35 years. And we may not ever know what those are, but this is where I really think self-love and compassion comes into play, because you can't, if you spend the next, rest of your life, half of your life, then beating yourself up because it took you that long to learn the lesson, then you really haven't learned anything at all. Right. So, we have to just be okay with we are exactly where we are supposed to be. And there's a reason that took us that long, and be okay with that.
Right. And another thing I want to note here, and maybe this is me being in our audience's business, but I guess that's part of what it means to have an audience. You and I both have a set of experiences that we would prefer that we wouldn't have had to live through. Yes. And on the other side of that, we are saying for ourselves, our stories happened the way they were supposed to have happened. Yeah. All the good and the bad and the ugly. I can also sense that people hearing that message, depending on their life experience and how they feel about their life experience, would have a really, really, really hard time swallowing that pill.
Sure.
Having someone else tell them that all that shit that happened to you was supposed to happen, right? And so I just do want to say that, like, this is an invitation to try that concept on for size and see how it fits, and it might not. I don't want to come off as us saying, like, this is how universally applicable to everybody, and this is how it is, and this is a healthy way to look at your whole history. Like, if you feel a bunch of, like, visceral bodily pushback against the idea that something that happened to you was supposed to happen, that's okay to have that pushback. Engage with the pushback, dig into it, but, like, I don't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because if you have that pushback, then I'm glad you're here. I'm glad that you are hearing this. And for some of our listeners, they may be going through one of those really difficult things right now. And when you're in it, it's incredibly hard to see that this is going to be any good.
And there's no way you're going to accept it from somebody on the outside, not going through what you're going through, saying, well, everything's happening the way it's supposed to happen. Like, yeah, it's understandable to be like, fuck that, and fuck you for saying that, you don't know my story. And that's also, like, that's an okay response. I just wanted to say that is a perfectly understandable response.
It is, but I'm with you. But then that is an opportunity for growth. If you are that rigid to it, that is a red flag to me that we're on to something. Because we have created a reaction in you. We are on to something.
You've pinpointed where the work is to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can honestly tell you, I would not be sitting in this chair on this podcast having created all that we have with True North had I not had those abuse, assault experiences. They have turned me into this person. Now, that didn't mean that it just happened overnight. I'm like, okay, great. Look who it made me. Let's start a podcast. I had to do a lot of internal personal work. I mean, ask anybody that knew me in my 20s and early 30s. Holy crap. I am a totally evolved person from who I was then because I did the work. But I was even writing about this the other day too. Like, I don't know that I could truly know what love and joy are if I didn't have the extreme opposites. In a way, like, I treat my experiences as my benchmark. Now, that's not going to be for everybody, and everybody's are different, but my own measuring stick, wow, it's intensified my positive emotions so much more because I'm able to see the negative ones as gifts.
Right,
but
and that's the journey that you're on.
Yes.
And all we're really doing is sharing our journey.
And that's what we're doing. Yes. And I'm choosing that, but I do recognize what you're saying, that that's incredibly hard to choose.
Depending on where you are in the journey. Like, we've talked on the podcast before about how I don't produce sperm, like, not any sperm, like, not a single sperm cell in any of the tests, like, it's just never happened. It probably won't ever happen. And when we were really, like, in the middle of, like, in the heat of the grief from what we thought the childbearing process was going to look like, because you have an idea, like, you start trying to conceive and you have a prescription of how you think it's going to go, and that's your path. Anything that's not that path is going to hurt. And I remember getting to the point where I would begrudge another human being just for having offspring. Like, that was a personal affront to me. If you had children, your very existence was something that I caused myself to be hurt by. And then you were a problem for me. And don't you dare complain about your kids.
You're right.
Because it's such a gift, right?
You get to have kids.
That's like complaining about the stitching on your fucking Rolls Royce. Like, no, that's not allowed. And I was so angry at so many people, and they never knew it. Just because they were parents. And if someone had told me, this is all part of the journey. Oh my God!
I would have.
They would have had my fist prints on their face, right?
Right. I know. Yes.
And then the whole journey went the way it did, and the sperm cell that created my son didn't come from my body, but it created my son, and my son is just the best thing that's ever happened in my life. For what he is, not because I have a kid, but because of that kid.
The way it was supposed to.
It all happened the way it was
supposed
to happen.
Well, and his soul chose you.
Right.
His soul chose you on the other side. So
and I mean, you go to a
he is
sperm
your
bank,
kid.
you're only going to get really, really, really good specimens, and he's probably cuter than he would have been if it had been a offspring. I mean, he just like
I
this
doubt
kid.
it.
He just checks all the boxes. He's a studly man
He's
kid, and he's
freaking adorable. Yeah.
I mean, like so like, but I wouldn't have heard that when I was in the middle of it. I wouldn't have heard that 2 years into finding out that I don't produce sperm. I wouldn't have heard that. There's a certain point at which you're like, oh, you can look back at the story.
Sure.
But that revelation, the everything happened the way it was supposed to, it only really works in past tense.
Yes, but that's why I like better. You are exactly where you need to be.
You are exactly where you need to be. Yeah.
And you may not know what that is because you are going through and you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you do want to bitch slap somebody every time they say something about complaining about their kid or something. Then yes, but the only way is through, and knowing that you're exactly where you should be. Then that's where that trust and that faith in the universe comes in, that you will figure out one day what this is supposed to mean. And right now, you just have to get through.
Right. The Stoics have this saying that says, the obstacle is the path.
Yes. The obstacle is the way. There's a book titled that.
The way? Maybe it's the way.
It's either, but the book is called The Obstacle is the Way.
Then that's probably the saying.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Man, I am fired up. I came into this kind of just mellow, but it was the kind of mellow that you feel after having a massage.
Oh,
like
nice.
Like the good mellow.
The chill.
Like my soul has gotten a massage. I've been doing some ARC sessions, and those are always like refreshing for me.
Yes.
I always feel like I'm the one receiving the energy work by the end of it. I'm just like, oh man, that was so good. And then like I actually finished a song today. Like
Nice.
my songwriting process is, I'm just going straight into the gratitudes. This is all just what I'm grateful for because we're at an hour. But like my songwriting process is I the way I phrase it is I watch them write themselves. Because I'll have a song brewing and I can feel it. I can feel it in my chest. I can feel it in my gut. I feel the song right here. I feel where it lives in my body.
Interesting.
And if I sit down with an instrument and I just let air out of my face holes, the song coalesces like raindrops in a cloud, completely independent of me. It doesn't come from me. It comes through me. And I will almost sing the whole song at like 85% completion at once. And it's almost like I'm listening to it play. And then, I can fill in the gaps, and, the lyrics are very much me and my vocabulary and my experience. But the core of the thing, the soul of the thing, I just watch being birthed. And while it is of me, it is not from me. It is its own thing. It always has been, right? And so I felt that bubbling up ever since like maybe last night. Well, it's been bubbling up for a while, but it really, really like came to a head. And so today I just picked up my guitar, and I just like vomited this song out, and I was like, oh, that's a good one. Like, oh man, and I'm just like kind of like getting that out. We were talking before about how I just have a bunch of stuff in here that needs to get out, and it's kind of getting in the way of me moving forward and all that stuff. And I think the song was a big chunk of that. It took a big chunk of my obstacle-ness out and put it somewhere else. And so now I just feel light. I feel
nice.
I just feel lighter, a lot lighter.
I like that. You reminded me of when you're describing music and how it flows through you, like that it's not from you. Something that Elizabeth Gilbert writes about in her book Big Magic.
Big Magic, yeah.
Yeah, where she talks about how there's just these ideas out there in the universe, whether they're fictional stories, they are their own entities. Not souls, like you say, but they are their own entities.
That's the same thing, basically. I mean, what makes it an entity is the fact that it has its own soul.
There are these energies out there in the form of ideas, and they seek people out. And so she's saying, like, there are these stories that seek her out, and if she chooses to write them, then they do. They flow through her, and she writes, and if not, then they will literally go on to the next person. I
love that idea so much. That idea, when I first heard it, I think she said it on the Robcast or something, but I remember thinking, like, this is fucking real. Like, I'm not even going to pretend that this is just like some idea that explains. I think that's an actual legit thing. Because how many times have you had an idea and then you don't do anything about it, and then like a month later you see a commercial for that idea. Like,
right.
And it's so easy to explain that with like, it came to you and you were like, no, I'm good. So it just bounced around until somebody was going to make it a thing, and now that's a thing, right? I've had an idea for like a collaborative songwriting platform thing, and I've shared that with a few musicians who have all had the same idea. None of us have acted on it. It is the exact same fucking idea to the smallest detail. And it's out there. It's been asking around. Are you my mother? Are you my mother?
Yes.
And no one said yes. And I'm like, well, if I only had less on my plate. And so and there's some ideas I've had for upwards of a decade. And after reading Big Magic, I will like interface with that idea, talk to the idea the exact same way I thought I was talking to God when I prayed as a little Southern Baptist, like sitting down, making space, addressing it. And my thing is always like, I will get to you. I promise. Do not go anywhere else. You are too good of an idea. Your time will come. You're all right where you need to be. It'll all happen the way it's supposed to happen. I am your man. Just I can't do it right now, but stay around because I want to be the person that makes you. I have some ideas. I'm just begging not to lose interest and go somewhere else. Like and so far they haven't, which is great.
Yeah, but well, we need to put that on our topic list because I think that would be fun to unpack, this idea that our ideas really our own.
Why don't we just talk to Liz when she comes on our podcast?
Okay, that works too. Works too. Yeah. Okay.
What are you grateful for?
Grateful for? Yeah. Just see, and this is like the whole reason why we even say these gratitudes at the end of our podcast is it just literally sounds like we're saying thanks for something, and that may be what it sounds like on the surface to you as a listener, but hopefully after this episode you really realize like that there is something very beneficial to your well-being to practice gratitude. And so this is one way that I do that. But I think today I really am grateful for a couple of people. The people in my neighborhood originally, like that I told the story about, that really were brave enough to say to me, please put your tree back up. We get so much out of this ourselves. And I'm grateful for that, number one, because yes, it helped them personally, but it also connected us. It connected me with those other neighbors and strengthened our relationship. And so I'm just grateful for that experience because now I'm connected to all of these other gratitude warriors that are choosing to do this as well. And we're creating this big community, to try to change the frequency one gratitude at a time.
Picking parasites out of each other's hair.
Yeah, and
there's that link between gratitude and connection. It's like they're hand in hand.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, gratitude is a social emotion. So
I like that.
And the other thing I'm grateful for are just literally the people that study this shit. Like they turn it into science. One of them is Robert Emmons. I mean, he has changed my life. I mean, he is the one that honestly made me realize that my whole experience with my first gratitude tree was the way it was because of what was going on in my brain. I could not have told you that, but I'm such a science geek and I love that stuff that like I got on his radar and the work that he does. And he makes my world better just by being a researcher and making gratitude so important and putting work out into the world that just supports how functional and how important it is to our society, to us as humans, to stay connected. So
there's a scene from the Lego Batman movie, which by the way, Kevin Conroy is and always will be the best Batman actor ever, but the close second is Will Arnett. Whoever.
Who's Batman Lego?
Yeah, Lego
Batman Lego.
That is.
Yeah. I don't know his name, but he also he hosted the Lego show on whatever channel it was.
Because of the Lego Batman. So anyway, there's a scene from that where he goes, I hate everything you just said. And I love that quote, but I want it to be, I love everything you just said. Like, I want to find my way to Will Arnett to get him to record him saying, I love everything you just said. Because I would quote the shit out of that. I love everything you just said.
Okay, great.
This is the me that you get freshly song written.
Yeah, I love it.
Whatever a better version of that sentence was, just pretend I said that.
Said that.
Instead, yeah. Whatever I just said, but only better.
I still keep talking with bad grammar and all, so we'll just roll with it. We're just showing up raw. We don't right edit this thing.
It all happened the way it was supposed to happen.
Yeah, I'm exactly where I need to be. Yep.
I see t-shirts.
Yeah.
Okay, well, until next time. Oh, subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yes.
Because we still only have 1 subscriber and we need 100 so that I can shorten the URL. Again,
because we do not want him to read that URL.
No, I just want a short URL for our show notes, people. That's all I need.
Please.
I need 100 subscribers. I'm not asking you to watch our videos.
Just subscribe.
I mean, if you do, you'll see. I got this cardigan from a friend last night, and it's like my favorite thing ever. It's like an old lady cardigan, but
still
I haven't
black.
taken it off. It's green.
Oh, it is? Oh, your room's dark. Yeah, it sure is. It's like a dark forest green.
It is a dark forest green.
Lovely.
I love it. I actually am grateful for this cardigan, not the song. Just the cardigan.
Okay.
What was I going to say? Oh, so subscribe to the YouTube thing.
Yes.
And if you want to be a part of our 1-year anniversary episode, we are doing a Q&A. And we want listener questions. We have a shit ton of listener questions, but I want a shitter ton.
Yeah.
But we're doing it blind. So
yes.
If you have a question for Abby, email it to Ryan at truenorth11.com. If you have a question for me, email it to Abby at truenorth11.com.
Yes.
Until next time.
Please.
Thank you for loving me. Thank you for being there.
Bye. We are grateful for you. Thank you for listening. And if you like what we're doing and you want more, then you can join our tribe to interact with other like-minded individuals. You can go through our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/TrueNorthPodcast11.
Is it Podcast 11 or is it True North 11?
Oh, shit.
It's in our show notes. If you want more than that, you want some more hands-on healing stuff that we do, I do actual energy healing and body work, and Abby does life coaching and workshops. You can find the URLs in our show notes when we figure out what they are.
Mm-hmm. And we are always trying to increase our reach and bring more people to find their true north. So we would really appreciate it if you could leave a review and rate it in whatever podcast platform you use.
Done. That's perfect.
What about the gratitude?
Oh, this one. Hang on. And one last thing. What are you grateful for? There. I said it. I said the thing.